Well, good day there, everybody. This is Joe Van Cleve. Welcome back. And I want to talk about photography today. And in specific, I have this desire to get out and do some photography, landscape photography. Might take a pinhole camera, might take my Intrepid 4x5 lens camera. And why do I want to do this all of a sudden? Well, it's getting to be toward the middle of September. I haven't been out much this summer in doing landscape photography. I really miss it. And now the weather in New Mexico is getting really good. The best time of year. Nice cool evenings. Warm but not hot daytimes. The rainy season is kind of diminishing. But it reminds me, when I was thinking about all this, I was thinking about these notebooks. I have binders full of old paper negatives and some contact prints. This was one of my favorite pictures, and I actually can't find the print to it right now. This is made at the El Malpais. The El Malpais is Spanish for the Badlands. They're lava fields. This is out by Grants, New Mexico, along the Continental Divide. And what you're seeing in the negative here, this is the top of the Sandstone Overlook. And so this is smooth, weathered sandstone. There is a crevasse or a little crevice in here that rainwater collects in. And then out on the horizon are the dark lava fields. And then there's a faint, hazy mountains in the sky in the distance. And I made this image back in the late 1990s with this pinhole camera. This camera has gone through some evolutionary changes over the years. I think it was my third pinhole camera in this design of what I call a falling plate camera. When I first was interested in pinhole photography in the late 1990s, mid to late 1990s, I was interested in figuring out how to be able to take more than one paper negative with me out in the field. Obviously, you could use a box camera and a changing bag, which I have done, or you could build a camera that takes sheet film holders and then buy some sheet film holders, which is also I've done. But I was looking for a more novel approach. One of the ideas that came up in my sketch journals repeatedly back in that time frame was the idea of having a stack of film holders in the back of the camera. And there was a system whereby the frontmost film holder, which has paper negative taped to it, once you're done with it, you can make it fall down into the bottom of the camera face down. And this, as I said, was the third camera that I built using this design. This one I originally built to be 5x7 format, but I was able to enlarge it the size of the film format later on, so this currently is 6x9.5. Originally, it did not have this plywood base thing, but to get a forward tilt to adjust your composition, I had to use this method, which is two plywood pieces connected with a hinge, a door hinge essentially. And then there is this metal strip with holes in it, and you basically move the little thumb screw into various holes, and you can change the angle. And it was pretty well fixed so that you're looking slightly downward at the landscape to put your horizon line up maybe along the top third. So kind of close-up landscape work. But I typically didn't do too many sky shots with paper negatives because the sky, you don't really get the clouds. The sky overexposes with paper negatives, so it's usually really white looking. So that's why typically it's the foreground kind of detail that I do with these kind of paper negative cameras. Anyways, that explains the base. And the base also has a tripod bushing, so you can attach it to your tripod. So the camera is made from a frame of 1/4-inch square wooden sticks, and it makes a space frame. And then this aluminum, the sheet aluminum, is aluminum flashing that you buy in a hardware store, and it comes in rolls. It's used for roofing, but you can cut it with a guillotine style paper trimmer. And then I used JB Weld epoxy to epoxy the aluminum onto the frame. So the shutter on the front of this camera is a pull shutter. Works like this, a nice gentle pull. Doesn't vibrate the camera at all, and in the up position it doesn't fall down. It has just the right amount of tension. This knob up here is the knob for changing the film holders out. So on the back of the camera there is a lid, and these knobs have some black felt glued to them that I'm using to create a light tight seal along where these bolts penetrate through the door. The back lid So the back lid opens up like this, and there's black felt on the back of it, and it's painted black. These were thin strips of 1/4-inch wide aluminum, but they've peeled off. The glue has come loose on the edge, so I'm using some gaffer's tape. So there's a metal flange protruding out from the side of the camera, and that allows the frame of the door of the back lid to seat on it, and that creates your light seal for the back of the camera. And what you see in here, this metal plate is a heavy galvanized steel plate that adds a little force, a little weight against the film holders to keep them pushed forward. So the film holders are made from this thin aluminum flashing material that has been spray painted matte black, and there is a notch on the top of the film holder, and the notches alternate left, right, left, right, left, right, and the film holders are numbered, and you simply use a loop of artist tape on the back of your paper negative to stick your paper negative to the front of the film holder. So what you have is a sandwich of 8 film holders. The camera will actually hold quite a bit more. It would probably hold several dozen if I really fully loaded it, but I've only made 8 of them so far. So there is the stack of 8 film holders, and this pin right here slides left and right with this top knob, and there is a light trap in here that allows the pin to go through, and it allows it to move without light getting in. That knob on top is kind of a thumb screw knob, and then I have a spacer as a little roller. And the way this film holder system works, I'll show you with the last film holder, number 8. If I keep the pin pushed toward the right side of the camera, the notch on number 8 is toward the left. So it'll sit in the camera like that. And let's say I've taken the exposure and I want to drop this film holder. I simply slide it to the left, and the film holder falls down into the bottom of the camera, face down, by the way, so that subsequent exposures won't fog the paper negative. And that's essentially how the camera works. You alternately push it left, right, to make those film holders fall in order. Now, one of the caveats of these falling plate cameras that you need to be aware of if you're interested in making something like this is when you're transporting the camera, you really have to keep the box camera upright like this. The risk is that the film holders could jump the little ledge in the bottom, and then the bottom of the film holders would fall into the camera, and then the whole thing would be jammed up, and it wouldn't allow you to load. So on the bottom in here, this ledge is where the film holders sit, and right in the front of it is a 1/4-inch high lip. And I've created that 1/4-inch high lip so that the distance between the top of the film holder and the top of the roof of the camera inside is less than a 1/4 inch. So in theory, you can't have the film holder jump this little lip on the bottom. But if the bottom of the film holder pulls back far enough, then it might slip or something. So you really kind of have to be careful and make sure that the camera stays level when you're transporting, which means if you throw the camera in the back of your car in the trunk or the back seat, you just don't want to have it tumble. The main body of this camera is so lightweight, and the base is made of 2 3/4-inch pieces of plywood. It really is very bottom heavy, and it makes it nice and stable. Well, here we are at the Sandstone Overlook, right up there. It's going to have a great view. Well, one of the first things I see is this pool of water that's collected from the rains. That is one possibility. However, if we look around here, I've done this shot before years ago, but not with as much water in it. Let's see. That's a cool vista. Maybe I'll try that first. So I frame up the shot by starting on the This dot here lined up to the front pinhole defines the left edge of my image, which is just to the left of the bush. And then the right side of the image is defined from this dot to the pinhole, and that's a little bit to the right of the edge of this bluff here. The up and down borders are defined by, from this pin mark to the pinhole, is just going to be below the ledge of that opening. And then the upper limit is from this dot to the pinhole, kind of defines the horizon line up on top. So that's kind of how you frame this kind of a camera, by using the viewing dots. Well, the exposure on this first pinhole shot is going to be about 40 seconds. It was metered at 2 seconds at f90, and it's an f400 pinhole, pretty small. So that calculates out to 40 seconds. That's ISO 12 for the Arista Grade 2 paper. And now I'm going to flip this knob and see if it'll fall down. You have to kind of listen for it. There it goes. And there's a little small pool, partly shaded. And there's some fellow tourists in the distance. Well, here's another potential scene. Cutting off part of the pool, but getting a little bit more of this brightly lit sandstone in the foreground. But the challenge will be one's shadow, making sure you don't get the shadow in the bottom of the picture. And I like this opening in the rock right there. It's really cool, kind of mirrors the shape of the pool. Well, this next exposure directly into the face of the cliff with the sun directly on it, it was 1 second at f90, so instead of 40 seconds exposure, it'll be 20 seconds exposure, one stop less. So here's the little fissure in the Sandstone Overlook that I took years ago that I showed you earlier. I'm going to try to reshoot this. I'm going to be taking the bottom edge of the image right about here. The top edge is below the horizon. I think I'm just going to get the landscape here below the mountains, and the left and right sides over there. So I should get all this fissure stuff in the foreground. 30-second exposure. Well, this first film exposure was pretty much the same as the last paper negative exposure of this fissure here. And it was 15th of a second f45 on TMax 100. Well, this next picture I just took is more of a close-up of this fissure. The top of the picture had some of the Malpais, the lava fields, and then it came down to about like here. So just a close-up of that. Well, so I have the lens board pointed down and the film board pointed slightly back, so hopefully I was able to get the shine flow gruel so I could get the landscape more totally in focus from front to back. And my third film shot was of this pool right here. I try to tilt the lens board back a little bit so that the film plane and the lens plane and the subject plane meet at some point, and then that should be focused pretty good, and it looked pretty good on my ground glass, even wide open at f5.6. So so many good shots here. Another reason to come back. Can't take them all in one day. Well, that was pretty fun. I shot 8 exposures, and certainly room for more compositions, room to come back in the future. So paper negatives and sheet film. Hopefully, if I don't botch them all up, I'll have a couple good pictures. So now it's driving back to Albuquerque, maybe stopping for a bite to eat. So I left Albuquerque about 10 o'clock in the morning, got back into town at 2 in the afternoon, so that was a little 4-hour jaunt. Anyway, so I have 8 exposures, so 4 paper negatives, 4 film exposures. And here's my film holders for the TMax 100. I think I'm going to pour up my 8x10 drawer trays with paper chemistry and develop those first, and then I'll get around to the film later. The film, in order for me to share it with you, I'm going to have to contact print or enlarge the negatives. I don't really have a good way of scanning 4x5 film adequately. All right, I guess I got some work to do now. But at first I have a cup of coffee. Well, I've taken to using my developing trays in a slightly different way at the suggestion of one of my viewers. Instead of alternating developer, rinse, stop, rinse, fix, rinse, I have the chemicals on this side, the rinses on this side, so I go developer to rinse, stop, rinse, fix. And it means that I can just go back and forth easier and don't have to have two drawers pulled out at the same time on any one side. It works better, and it was a very great suggestion of his. Okay, let's review the results of my paper negatives from the pinhole camera. So this first one, looking at that large pool, one of the obvious things is the horizon is tilted. Didn't get straight, and I think I was too focused on the borders, and I didn't pay attention to the level of it as much. But the other thing is there's a glaring dark, I should say a light spot right here near the bottom center of the image, and it looks like I don't know, maybe the emulsion got damaged or something in loading it. In the photo I took on the digital camera, I've clone stamped it out just for the purpose of clarity there, but that does detract from the ability of it being easily contact printed. Then this particular shot, I like the tonal range much better. I think I reduced the developing time on it. I know the exposure was different also, but the glaring problem with this one obviously is the horizon is weirdly tilted, really badly tilted in fact, to the point that the only way this could really be used in a print or whatever is if you made a severe crop and made it more of a panoramic looking shot. This paper negative, I thought, it's great except for one problem. I love the composition. The tones are great, but there's a problem. Is right here on the left side is these bands, light and dark bands. And I think this was something to do with improper agitation in the print tray when I was processing the negative. So this final negative, which was similar composition, a little closer up on the crevasse, I went ahead and just continuously agitated for 2 or 3 minutes, and this is obviously the best paper negative of the whole batch. This is the one for sure that I'll probably contact print and make a silver print of. Well, so I have 2 sheet film holders with 4 TMax 100 negatives. I try to keep the film holders in a plastic bag just to keep dust out of them, but I'm going to try developing all 4 of these negatives at once. And I'm going to use this Stearman Press SP445 4x5 sheet film processing system. Here's the instructions to it. I've bought this a year or 2 ago. I think I've used it a couple times. So it has a lid that pulls off, and it is sealed with like a Viton O-ring. There is a fill and drain port and a vent port with a cap. And the heart of the system is that it uses 2 double-sided film holder plates that you load the film onto. And there's little baffles in here that allows the fluids to go through without leaking light. And so I'm going to try loading this in the darkroom in the dark and then putting this on. I've noticed the lid feels like it could easily pull off, so I'm going to probably put an elastic band around this just to keep it on more securely. Okay, so I haven't processed TMax 100 in a long time, and I'm going to use the recommendation from this Kodak data guide that I have that dates back to 1995. So my TMax 100, the Type 4052 film, they recommend if you're using HC110 developer in dilution B, it recommends 7 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's at 68 Fahrenheit. So 7 minutes and 30 seconds. I use my HC110 from concentrate directly. So dilution B is 1 plus 31 from concentrate. And the Stearman tank takes 475 milliliters of solution. So the math is 1 part of concentrate plus 31 parts water will be 475. You do the math, and that 1 part concentrate is 14.8 milliliters. So you need about 460.2 milliliters of water with 14.8 milliliters of concentrate to make your 475 at a dilution of 1 plus 31. All right, I'm going to remove both caps as per the instruction, and we'll be filling it, spilling it, put the vent cap on, going to squeeze the tank and then put the fill drain cap on. Okay, it's been close to 5 minutes of fixing. I've done like inversion agitation, kind of similar to the film processing. I'm going to put some water in here. It just gives me a little bit of a rinse so we're not dealing with just pure fixer. Well, let's see what we get here. Take the lid off. Oh, nice. Oh, looks like, wow, pretty nice. Okay, I'm going to have to finish rinsing these. And this is how I rinse the prints in the Stearman tank, and also water my tree so I don't waste fresh drinking water down the drain. So I'm going to be using a rinse aid, this Kodak Photo Flow, and it recommends to dilute it 1 to 200 with water. And so for a volume of 475, it comes out to be about just under 2.5 milliliters of photo flow and the rest water to make 475. And I found it a good idea with this photo flow to stir it really good, make sure it's very well mixed. Otherwise you can have local areas on the film that get too much photo flow and they get kind of sticky. And as well as mixing it really thoroughly, you don't want to create too many bubbles or suds because it is a surfactant, and so that's going to be the thing pouring it into the Stearman tank. You have to kind of do it very slowly. Alright, I got a little funnel on here, just should have done that earlier. Okay, so what I did is I popped the lid off. There was a lot of foam in it, I rinsed it off. There they are drying, and I'll close this up and let them do their thing. Okay, this first film negative, I think overall I really like the exposure. The highlights are dense, but they still have detail in them. And the shadows, the darkest shadow right here is pretty dense, hardly anything, but there's some zone 2 roughly right here that has detail. But I think the biggest thing that detracts from this negative is this funny little artifact right in the middle. Maybe the center of the negative was touching the other negative behind it. This probably here keeps this from being used. This negative here I'm pretty pleased with overall. I have a lot of the distant landscape below the cliffs here. Some good detail right here. And it looks like I got pretty close to the edge of the frame on the foreground of this little pool of water. But the highlights look pretty good. It looks like I retained all the detail on the highlights. Now I did have this artifact in several of the negatives. This right here on the edge. And I think it's related to the developing tank, the film holders. They somehow abrade or rub off a little bit of the emulsion. But if you look at the way the film holder is curved, the edge of the frame, see how it curves out here? This is going to get cropped out anyways when I print it, because I'm going to have to crop it to this corner here that has a thicker border. So this third shot is looking west, directly due west off the edge of the cliff here. This is kind of the film version of that old paper negative I showed you from back in 1997. A little bit of glare from my protector sheets here, so ignore that. I really love the tones. The highlight details here is really nice. This area down here, it doesn't fade away quite as dramatically as it looks like, and just because of the way the glare is. But I love this simplistic composition, this horizon, so to speak, the edge of the cliff, and the way this crevasse cuts through it, and the dark shadows. There's different tones in that I'm hoping will print really good. And finally, this image was shot pretty close up with the camera pointing down from the tripod, and I had to tilt the lens board forward to try to get the near and foreground in focus. And this landscape in the distance below the cliff is focused, and right up here at the foreground, right below the tripod legs, is also in focus. Now, the close-up of this crevasse is just lovely. I love all the tones in here, and I'm hoping this is going to print really nicely. Again, the little scratch from the Stearman Press developing tank, I think we'll just crop that out when we make the print, though. Well, to finish off this project, I had a late-night darkroom printing session last night. And the result was I printed 2 of the 4x5 film negatives. I was kind of pleased with the way the prints came out. These are printed on Ilford Multigrade RC Warm Tone. And this first picture here, it was, I think, a 12.5 second exposure, grade 3 filter. This is a straight print, and both of these were, I didn't do any dodging or burning. I reduced the exposure time from like 15 seconds to 12.5 because I wanted the dark landscape in the upper part of the image to have a little bit of detail. And the rest of the image pretty much took care of itself. The 4x5 negatives at TMax 100 is really sharp film, and I really love it. I noticed on the second print now, the negative was slightly thinner, so it had a little bit less exposure, and so at the same enlargement time of 12.5 seconds, it would have been darker. I reduced it to 10 seconds. It is a little darker still, and you can see the in the upper part of the image, the distant landscape is quite dark, and ideally I would probably dodge that during a print to lighten it up a little bit. And also, I think this shadow, in the main shadow in the central part of that fissure toward the bottom, I don't think there's any real detail in there in the negative. Let me take a look at it. There is some barely perceptible stuff, and that would take some advanced darkroom tricks like maybe pre-flashing the print to get any kind of shadow detail out of it. But I was pretty happy with the image overall. I was especially happy with my focusing, that this was one of the first times I've had to really work with camera movements to get a sharp plane of focus that's otherwise not parallel to your film plane at a moderate aperture. And so this one came out really nice. I was very pleased with it. So this combination of TMax 100, which I haven't really used that much, and HC 110, it looks pretty good to me, at least for these moderate sized enlargements. I don't really see any granularity problems, and it looks like the negatives develop pretty straightforward. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and this was just a spur-of-the-moment day trip, and I really wanted to get out, just do some photography, both paper negative, pinhole photography, and film photography on 4x5. And I hope this gives you guys some inspiration to do your own creative adventures like landscape photography. If you guys have any questions about the cameras, the process, or whatever, leave a comment down below, and I'll try my best to answer them. And until next time, have yourselves a great day.